Hello guys and gals, my name is Soulfax and welcome to the second episode of my Witcher lore series of videos. Now before I start talking about what I want to talk about in this episode, I want to thank all of you for the amazing support on the first episode. I wasn't expecting such an overwhelmingly positive response, and I have to be honest and say, oh shucks you guys, please stop it, you're making me blush. In all seriousness, thank all of you who watched that first episode, and I also want to welcome the 20 odd people who through that video discovered my channel and decided to subscribe. I hope your stay is as pleasant as mine. Today we will continue talking about the main protagonist of the Witcher saga, Geralt of Rivia, for there is still much to be said about his character and what changes his persona goes throughout the books. One of the overarching themes of the Witcher saga is the figurative chokehold destiny has on the life of a person and the struggle to break out of its grip and change one's destiny, taking your own life in your own hands and shaping it for the better. On the flip side, the phrase "destiny is a double-edged sword" is thrown around frequently throughout the books. It's meant to impress upon the reader that letting go and putting your life in destiny's hands is no better than fighting tooth and nail, trying to change things that are just meant to be. If you try to fight destiny, destiny might just fight back, and no one fights and in a way fears destiny more than Geralt, in the beginning at least. Geralt's quarrel with destiny began shortly after his birth, when the said force decided to take away from him the privilege of experiencing a normal, loving childhood surrounded by his parents and instead forced him to endure the harsh northern winds in Kaer Morhen. But he endured. He crawled and scratched his way through his Witcher training, stubbornly surviving against the odds and taking destiny head on until he finally matured into a Witcher, the likes of which the world has never seen before. At the chronological start of the books, the name the White Wolf is known in every village, every town, every muddy hut lost in the marshes. It is whispered around campfires north and south of the Jurga. Some whisper it out of fear and some spit it out in disgust, but it cannot be denied that in the recorded human history there has not been a Witcher as accomplished and as well known as Geralt, that even kings and queens seek out his services when their royal power proves insufficient and the situation requires a more professional touch. He fought and killed for years, cutting down ghouls, neckers, rot fiends, water hags, great lichens, werewolf, wyrms, griffins, and men. Countless men who thought the bedtime stories their nana told them about witchers are just fairy tales, and the razors Witcher carry on their backs are just for show. Graveyards are full of men who underestimated Witchers. Geralt fought destiny on his own terms and seemingly won the fight, but there is another way of looking at his remarkable success. Throughout his life, Geralt always found a way to survive and keep going. First the trial of grasses, and afterwards when he was submitted to additional mutations. So many times did he come to the brink of death after putting down a monster or fighting back a curse, and yet he always found a way to survive. Through sheer will, skill, and other times by just pure luck was he saved from certain death. It is undeniable that Geralt is very good at being a Witcher. So good in fact that one can't help but wonder. Was it Geralt's stubborn insistence on surviving and telling destiny to go plow itself the main reason he became such a legend, or was Geralt in fact always meant to be a Witcher? Was it his destiny to walk this ungrateful path and leave this bloody mark on history? Was it his personal skill and fighting prowess, or just dumb luck that he somehow managed to survive so far and gain this legendary status? Sadly, we will never know. But if you were to ask Geralt this question, he would most likely smirk and comment on how destiny is for men who believe in it and not him. But either way, going through all of that made him the man he is, the man we meet in The Last Wish. A cold, calculated professional who works for money and not gratitude, uncompromising in his work ethics and unbending when it comes the time to pay up the agreed upon reward. Always moving forward and never looking back.
Looks like rain.
This is the Geralt we meet at the beginning of The Last Wish, but it's definitely not the same Geralt that, at the end of The Lady of the Lake, which is chronologically the last book in the series, faces an angry mob, just to defend the weak and the helpless. To further illustrate the ruthless professional we get to meet at the beginning of The Last Wish, I will now read an excerpt from the first chapter of The Last Wish, in which Geralt arrives at a small town, and passing over the better-looking inn, he decides to take shelter in the worst establishment the town has to offer. And also, I want to apologize in advance for my horrible attempt at voice acting. The innkeeper raised his head above a barrel of pickled cucumbers and measured the man with his gaze. The outsider, still in his coat, stood stiffly in front of the counter, motionless and silent. "What will it be?" "Beer," said the stranger. His voice was unpleasant. The innkeeper wiped his hand on his canvas apron and filled a chipped earthenware tankard. The stranger was not old, but his hair was almost entirely white. Beneath his coat he wore a worn leather jerkin laced up to the neck and shoulders. As he took off his coat, those around him noticed that he carried a sword. Not something unusual in itself. Nearly every man in Vizim carried a weapon, but no one carried the sword strapped on his back as if it were a bow or a quiver. The stranger did not sit at a table with a few other guests. He remained standing at the counter, piercing the innkeeper with his gaze. He drew from the tankard. "I'm looking for a room for the night." "There's none," grunted the innkeeper, looking at the guest's boots, dirty and dusty. "Ask at the old Naracourt." "I would rather stay here." "There is none." The innkeeper finally recognized the stranger's accent. He was Rivian. "I'll pay." The outsider spoke quietly, as if unsure, and the whole nasty affair began. A pockmarked beanpole of a man who, from the moment the outsider had entered, had not taken his gloomy eyes from him, got up and approached the counter. Two of his companions rose behind him, no more than 2 paces away. "There's no room to be had, you Rivian vagabond," rasped the pockmarked man, standing right next to the outsider. "We don't need people like you in Vizim. This is a decent town." The outsider took his tankard and moved away. He glanced at the innkeeper, who avoided his eyes. It did not even occur to him to defend the Rivian. After all, who liked Rivians? "All Rivians are thieves," the pockmarked man went on, his breath smelling of garlic and anger. "Do you hear me, you bastard?" "He can't hear you. His ears are full of shit," said one of the men with him, and the second man cackled. "Pay and leave," yelled the pocked man. Only now did the Rivian look at him. "I'll finish my beer." "We'll give you a hand," the pockmarked man hissed. He knocked the tankard from the stranger's hands and, simultaneously grabbing him by the shoulder, dug his fingers into the leather straps which ran diagonally across the outsider's chest. One of the men behind him raised a fist to strike. The outsider curled on the spot, throwing the pockmarked man off balance. The sword hissed in its sheaths and glistened briefly in the dim light. The place seethed. There was a scream, and one of the few remaining customers tumbled towards the exit. The innkeeper, his lips trembling, looked at the horribly slashed face of the pocked man who, clinging with his fingers to the edge of the counter, was slowly sinking from sight. The other two were lying on the floor, one motionless, the other one writhing and convulsing in a dark, spreading puddle. A woman's hysterical screams vibrated in the air, piercing the ears as the innkeeper shuddered, caught his breath and vomited. The stranger retreated towards the wall, tense and alert. He held the sword in both hands, sweeping the blade through the air. No one moved. Terror, like cold mud, was clear on their faces, paralyzing limbs and blocking throats. As you could have clearly heard from that chapter, this Geralt is no hero. At the root of this not-so-sudden change is something that no one but Geralt can talk about with absolute certainty. One of the many side effects of the Trial of the Grasses is that the would-be Witcher has its heart turned to stone. His emotions are burned out, and what is left is but a blank canvas waiting to be painted with steel and blood. It is never explicitly confirmed, but I can say with almost utmost certainty that Geralt's emotion, the little he was able to discover within himself at such a young age, were left intact after the herbs have done their work. Although his emotional range was never exceptionally broad, Geralt could most definitely feel sorrow, loneliness, doubt, and even love. If destiny does exist, it certainly has a vile sense of humor. Geralt is the perfect killer, capable of such carnage he could easily put a small warband to shame. He is the best of the best, a monster killer for hire, who is in the end tortured and chained by the most basic, simple human emotion out there: empathy. Geralt has always had doubts about his profession. Doesn't matter who or what he cuts down. Was it a bruxa or a simple ghoul? A part of him is always wondering if he did the right thing by proclaiming himself the judge, jury, and executioner. Is it right to cut down a basilisk who is driven to kill not by malice, but a survival instinct all living beings shares? Do sentient, intelligent creatures such as Dopplers, Dovels, and Succubi have the same basic right to live as the rest of the intelligent races, or does their grotesque form and superhuman abilities deny them that right? Does choosing the lesser evil bring about the objectively better outcome, when the lesser evil is after all just another form of evil? Geralt would like it if he never had to choose at all, but life is never that simple. These are the questions that torture Geralt when he lies under the stars, and that in the end cause him to try and indiscriminately shut out all of his emotions and just let his body take him where it does. Aimlessly riding down the path, killing a monster here and lifting a curse there, pretending to be nothing more than just an emotionless monster killer, until one day death finally catches up to him. His story would have most likely ended in such a manner, but at one point Geralt decided to play with destiny, and in doing so, fate had it that he would meet a person who would change him for the better. He met Princess Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhinon, but that is a story for another time. But yeah, that would be it for this episode. I hope my dramatic approach didn't seem to be overly dramatic. I don't know, but anyhow, the next episode will be again focusing on Geralt and how he played with destiny and bound Cirilla to himself in a way. Lastly, I hope you enjoyed this video. My name has been Soulfax, and I will see you next time, probably again in Friday. So yeah, until then, have fun and, I don't know, watch out for yourself. Goodbye.